My name is Maya. I'm 30 years old, recently divorced, and for the last 3 years I've been secretly paying my mother's rent. She tells everyone I'm a failure, but somehow my useless life has been the one keeping her lights on. Tonight, at a family dinner, she pushed things too far. Mom laughed in front of the whole family, her voice cutting through the clatter of plates. "How does it feel to be useless, daughter?" she asked loudly, making sure every single person at the table heard it. My stomach knotted for a second, the old instinct to shrink and apologize flashing through me, but it passed. I looked at her calmly and said, "Feels great, since I just stopped paying your rent." Her smile froze, then vanished completely. The room went quiet in an instant. My father's fork slipped from his hand and clinked against his plate. He stared at me like I'd just confessed to a crime. "What rent? Why?" he demanded, his voice sharper than I'd heard in years. My mother's eyes darted between us, searching for a way to spin this, to twist my words back on me like she always did. But this time, I wasn't backing down. She had no idea this confrontation wasn't an accident. It was the moment I'd been planning for months, down to every word and every witness. What happened after that single sentence shocked everyone at the table and forced me to decide whether I'd finally break free or crawl back. For a second, nobody moved. It was like the whole table forgot how to breathe. Then my mother found her voice. "Don't be dramatic," she snapped, forcing a laugh that didn't quite land. "She's just joking. You know how sensitive she gets." I didn't let her finish. "I'm not joking," I said, keeping my eyes on my dad. "For 3 years, I've been paying her rent every month, out of my salary, out of my divorce settlement. She told me you couldn't handle the stress, so I kept quiet, but I'm done." That got his attention. My dad's face went from confused to pale, then to something I hadn't seen in a long time, pure, cold anger. "Is that true?" he asked my mother slowly. "Have you been taking money from her and not telling me?" Mom, her name is Diane, but in moments like this she's just Mom in my head, straightened in her chair, shoulders stiff. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You know how she exaggerates. I needed a little help after my hours got cut. I didn't want to burden you, so I asked our daughter. That's what family does." "A little help?" I repeated, feeling the familiar heat rising in my chest. "Mom, I've paid your entire rent, utilities included, for 36 months. You called me crying, saying you'd be homeless without me. You said if I didn't help, you'd end up on the street and everyone would know what a selfish daughter I am." A murmur rippled around the table. My dad looked at me, then at her. "I never knew any of this," he said, voice low. "You told me you were fine. You said you had everything under control." "I did," she shot back. "And now she wants to humiliate me in front of everyone because she's bitter about her divorce." I almost laughed. "You humiliated me first," I reminded her, "in front of the same people you've been bragging to. You're right, though. This is about control. You didn't just need help. You liked having leverage. As long as I was paying, you could call me useless and still know I'd show up every month." Her jaw clenched. For once, she didn't have a quick comeback. "Why didn't you tell me?" my dad asked again, this time to me. "Because every time I tried to say no, she would bring you up," I replied. "She'd say, 'You're just like your father, always running away when things get hard.' And I believed her. I thought I owed her my entire life." I could feel everyone watching us, but I didn't care. This wasn't just an argument, it was evidence being laid out. And this was only the beginning. The question was, would anyone at that table finally see who she really was? Or would they keep pretending I was the problem? I didn't answer right away when my dad repeated, 3 years? Like he needed to hear it out loud to believe it. My mind flicked back to the first night it started. I had just moved out after my divorce, dragging boxes of my life into a tiny apartment I could barely afford. Before I'd even unpacked, Mom called. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "They're raising the rent," she'd cried. "Your father doesn't care. He says I should tighten my belt." "I can't do this alone. You know how fragile I am." "Are you really going to abandon your own mother when she needs you?" I remember staring at the half-unpacked boxes still smelling like my ex's house, feeling like a failure in every direction. "I'll help," I'd said back then, throat tight. "Just until you get back on your feet." She stopped crying instantly. "I knew you were a good daughter," she'd said. "You've always had a better heart than your father." That was the first transfer. 1 month became 3. 3 became 12. Every time I hinted I couldn't keep doing it, she weaponized her voice like a knife. "After everything I sacrificed for you. If you don't help me, who will? No wonder your marriage failed. You only think about yourself. And the worst one of all? You're lucky I still claim you as my daughter." Sitting at that table now, I realized how rehearsed those lines had been. How easily I'd swallowed them. "He doesn't need to know every detail," Mom cut into my thoughts, waving a dismissive hand toward my dad. "I asked for help as a mother. That's normal," she agreed. "I agreed because you made me feel like a monster if I said no," I said. "You told me Dad would turn everyone against me if he found out you were struggling, that he'd say you were bad with money. So I kept your secret. I took on your debt, your rent, your guilt." My dad's eyes hardened. "Diane," he said quietly, using her name like a warning. "Did you tell her that?" She laughed nervously, but no sound reached her eyes. "You know how dramatic she gets." She tried again. "I was under a lot of stress. I may have said some things I didn't mean." "You meant every word," I said. "You wanted me scared and dependent. As long as I believed I owed you, I wouldn't leave." That was when another memory surfaced, the one that had pushed me to plan tonight. Last month, when my account overdrafted because the rent transfer went through the same day my car broke down. I'd called her panicking. Instead of sympathy, she'd said, "Well, if you managed your money better, you wouldn't be in this situation. Maybe you're just not cut out for adult life." That night, I'd stared at my bank app, then at the pile of receipts and messages between us. Something snapped. I printed everything. I saved screenshots, and I started recording the way she talked to me. I knew she would never stop as long as everything stayed hidden. "You want to talk about being useless?" I said now, feeling my voice steady. "I've been paying your rent, your internet, your electricity. I bailed you out on that emergency credit card bill too. And somehow, in every version of the story you tell people, I'm still the failure." She opened her mouth, but this time I was faster. "Tonight was never just a dinner," I said. "It was my line in the sand. I'm not here to protect your image anymore." I reached into my bag and felt the edge of the envelope I'd brought. The one stuffed with bank statements, screenshots, and the new lease agreement I'd signed for myself alone. I hadn't decided yet how far I was willing to go. But after the way she laughed in my face, after all the years of being called useless while funding her life, that decision suddenly became a lot easier. Would I really dare to pull out everything in front of my dad, my relatives, and the people in this crowded restaurant, and finally show them who she'd been behind closed doors? The restaurant noise slowly crept back in, clinking glasses, low conversations, but at our table, it felt like time had stalled. My mother's eyes were on my hand as I pulled the thick envelope from my bag and set it down between us. "What is that?" she asked, her voice tight. "Proof," I said simply. "Of every transfer, every loan that never got paid back, every time you told me you had no one else." My dad reached for it, but Mom slapped her palm on top of the envelope. "Mark, don't," she said quickly. "This is ridiculous. She's overreacting. We can talk about this at home." I looked him straight in the eye. We already tried talking at home, I said. That's how we got here. She counts on private conversations so she can rewrite them later. That's why I brought this tonight. I needed witnesses. I could feel people at nearby tables glancing over, pretending not to listen. Normally, that would have made me shrink. Tonight, it made me feel stronger. Let them hear. Let them see her without the script. My dad gently, but firmly, slid the envelope out from under her hand. Papers spilled onto the table, highlighted bank statements, screenshots of messages where she'd promised. Just one more month. Scribbled notes of dates and amounts. He flipped through them slowly. The silence was louder than any shouting. You told me your sister helped you with that card bill, he said, frowning at one page. You said your job covered the rent, that you were managing. Mom's smile looked like it had been painted on in a hurry. I didn't want to stress you, she insisted. You yelled the last time I mentioned money. I asked Maya because she offered. No, I cut in. You cried. You said if I didn't help, you'd just disappear, and it would be my fault. You told me not to tell him because he never cared. You made me carry everything alone. My dad's hand trembled slightly as he held the papers. He wasn't an emotional man, but I could see something breaking in him. Something that had already fractured years ago when their marriage first crumbled. Did you really tell her that about me? He asked. That I don't care? Mom's mask slipped for a second. I was upset, she muttered. You always make me out to be the villain. Do you know how hard it is, being the only one holding this family together? I almost choked. Holding it together? I repeated. You've been pulling the strings. You insult me in front of everyone, but behind the scenes you drain my accounts. You call me useless while living in an apartment I pay for. Her eyes snapped to me. Watch your tone, she hissed. I'm still your mother. Exactly, I said quietly. You're my mother. You were supposed to protect me, not turn me into your emergency fund. I could feel the anger boiling under my skin, but I kept my voice level. And just so we're clear, starting next month, your landlord will be calling you, not me. Her head jerked up. What? I already spoke to him, I said. I told him I won't be paying anymore. I also told him to take my name off anything it was never supposed to be on in the first place. Her face lost color. You wouldn't dare. I already did, I answered. That's why I said it feels great. For once, your consequences are yours. A couple at the next table exchanged a look. My mother noticed. Her voice dropped, a new note of panic creeping in. People are staring, she whispered. You're embarrassing yourself. No, I said. I'm embarrassing you. And the fact that you care more about that than about what you've done says everything. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, but something inside me had gone strangely calm. There was no going back now. Maya, my dad said slowly, is this why you were always short on money? Why you turned down that trip? Why you sold your car? Mom jumped in. Oh, please, she's always been bad with money. You know how impulsive she is. She's just trying to blame me because it's easier than taking responsibility. I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened a folder, and placed its screen up on the table. These are recordings from the last few months, I said. Of our calls. Of the things you said when nobody else was around. Her eyes widened. You recorded me? I told you I was tired of feeling crazy, I replied. So I started keeping receipts. Literal and emotional. I wanted to make sure I wasn't imagining the way you talked to me. For the first time that night, she looked genuinely scared. Not angry. Not offended. Scared. You wouldn't play those, she whispered. Not in front of everyone. You're not that cruel. I stared at her, thinking about every time she'd told me I'd be nothing without her. Every night I'd stayed awake worrying about paying her rent instead of buying my own groceries. Every time she'd laughed at my pain like it was a joke. "You spent years teaching me that love means humiliation," I said. "Tonight, I get to decide what love means for me." My thumb hovered over the play button. If I hit it, there would be no more pretending. No more, "She's just sensitive." Just the raw, ugly truth. Was I really ready to let everyone hear the way my mother spoke when she thought the world couldn't hear her? Before I could press play, a hand gently closed around my wrist. I looked up and saw my aunt standing beside me, Sarah, my mother's younger sister. I hadn't even noticed her arrive. She must have shown up late and caught enough to piece things together. "Let her talk first," Sarah said quietly. "You don't have to burn everything down in one breath." Mom scoffed. "Oh, great, here comes the therapist," she muttered under her breath. Sarah ignored her. She pulled out a chair and sat next to me, close enough that I could feel her steady presence like an anchor. "I heard enough from the doorway," she said to my dad, to the rest of the table. "This isn't the first time Diane has done something like this." Mom's head snapped toward her. "Excuse me?" Sarah folded her hands on the table. "Do you want me to bring up the time you put a credit card in my name when I was in college?" she asked calmly. "Or when you took money from Grandma and told her it was for medical tests while you were actually buying new furniture?" A gasp went around the table. My grandmother, Patricia, stiffened at the mention of her name. "That was years ago," Mom hissed, "and I paid you back." "No, you didn't," Sarah said. "You guilted me into dropping it. Just like you guilted Maya into paying your rent. It's the same pattern. You play the victim, you cry, you say you'll fix it, and when someone calls you out, you call them ungrateful." I had never heard anyone talk to my mother like that. Not without backing down. Not and stay at the table. "You knew?" I asked Sarah, my voice thinner than I wanted it to be. "Not about the rent," she said. "If I'd known, I would have stepped in sooner." But I recognized the tone. The way she spoke to you just now. It's the same way she spoke to me when she needed something. Mom shook her head in disbelief. "You are all ganging up on me," she said, eyes shining with angry tears. "I am the one who held this family together. I did everything by myself, and this is the thanks I get?" "You didn't hold us together," I said softly. "You held us hostage." The words hung in the air, heavier than anything else I'd said. My grandmother finally spoke. "Is it true?" Patricia asked, her voice trembling. "Did you take money from her all this time?" Mom opened her mouth, closed it, then settled on half-truths. "I borrowed some help when I needed it," she said. "Parents do that. I was going through a hard time. You all act like I'm some kind of monster." "Monsters don't always look like monsters," Sarah replied. "Sometimes they look like people who can't admit they were wrong." I glanced around and caught sight of something that made my stomach flip. At a table nearby, a teenager was very obviously recording us with her phone, trying to pretend she wasn't. Mom saw it too. Her face drained of color. Image was everything to her. Church committees, community events, her Facebook persona as the strong single mother who survived. The idea that people might see her like this, desperate, cornered, exposed, terrified her more than anything. "Please," she whispered, leaning toward me, "don't play those recordings. Don't let anyone hear." "Now you care what people hear?" I asked. "You didn't care when you called me a burden, when you said I'd end up alone, when you told me no one else would ever put up with me." Tears burned my eyes, but I didn't look away. "You said those things because you thought no one would ever know. You thought I'd keep covering for you." My dad cleared his throat. His voice, when he spoke, was rough. "Maya," he said, "whether you play that or not is your choice. But I believe you. You shouldn't have had to prove it to me. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." That apology hit harder than any insult my mother had ever thrown at me. For a moment, I had to look down at my hands just to steady myself. I didn't want to destroy you, I told my mother quietly. I wanted you to stop, to admit what you did, to let me go. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. Maybe she didn't. She was used to the version of me who folded, who apologized, who sent the transfer and said nothing. If you walk away from me, she said, voice shaking, you'll regret it. When you fall, when life hits you again, you'll have no one. That's not true, Sarah said immediately. She has me. She has friends. She has herself. That's more than she's had in a long time. I met my mother's eyes. For the first time, I didn't see a giant towering over me. I saw a scared, controlling woman who would rather burn every bridge than admit she was wrong. I slipped my phone back into my pocket without pressing play. She let out a breath of relief she couldn't hide. I'm not sparing you, I said before she could speak. I'm sparing myself. I don't need to relive those words in stereo. I already know what they did to me. The teenager at the other table frowned, realizing she wasn't getting the explosion she wanted. I didn't care. My revenge wasn't about giving strangers a show. It was about taking my life back. But I'm done paying your rent, I continued. I'm done keeping your secrets. If people find out, it won't be because I exposed you. It'll be because your behavior finally caught up with you. My mother swallowed hard, her face crumpling for a moment before she forced it smooth again. So what now? She asked. You just walk away? I took a slow breath. Everything in me wanted to shake, to scream, to cry, but instead I felt strangely steady. What happens now, I said, is that I stop being the useless daughter you always said I was, because the truth is, I was never useless. I was useful to you. You just never expected me to stop. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the floor, loud and final. This is the last bill I ever pay for you, I said, the emotional one. I didn't know yet what the next days would look like, or how far the fallout from tonight would spread. I just knew one thing with terrifying, exhilarating clarity. I had finally chosen myself. And as I turned to leave that table, I realized I still had one last card to play. One decision that would decide whether this night ended as a quiet boundary or as the complete collapse of my mother's perfect image. Should I walk away and let time do its work? Or should I use the proof I had to make sure she could never twist the story again? I didn't get very far. I just stepped away from the table when I heard my dad call my name. Maya, wait. There was something in his voice that made me stop. Not anger, not disappointment. Just urgency. I turned. He was standing a few feet away from the table, the envelope still in his hand. Shoulders slumped like someone had just told him his whole life was a lie. Sarah stood beside him, one hand lightly touching his arm. My mother stayed seated, frozen between anger and panic, eyes darting around to see who was watching. I need to understand, he said quietly when I walked back toward them. What do you want to happen now? No one had ever asked me that before. Not, what did your mother say? Not, what did you do? But what I wanted. The answer surprised me. I want it to stop, I said. I want her to stop using me. Stop twisting everything. Stop acting like I'm the problem when I'm the one paying the price. And what about the money? He asked. Do you want it back? For a moment, I imagined demanding every cent. It would be satisfying, watching her scramble, finally feeling the weight she'd dumped on me. But I already knew what that would cost me. Years of more fighting, more excuses, more poor me speeches. I didn't want my revenge to chain me to her forever. I want accountability, I said. If she pays anything back, it should be because she chooses to, not because I'm chasing her. The real payback for me is not letting her do this again. Not to me, not to Sarah, not to anyone. Sarah nodded. We can help make that happen, she said, but it has to start with the truth. We went back to the table together. The air felt thick, like the whole restaurant had shifted a few degrees. My mother sat rigid, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Have we finished humiliating me? She asked coldly. Or do you want to read her diary out loud too? My dad sat down slowly, folding the papers back into the envelope. This isn't about humiliation, he said. This is about what you did. You lied to me. You lied to our daughter. You lied to your own mother and sister. You took money from all of them and made them feel guilty for not doing more. She let out a sharp laugh. Oh, please, like you never lied. Like you're some saint. I'm not, he said. But I'm done pretending this is normal. He slid the envelope toward her. You're going to call your landlord tomorrow. You're going to tell him the payments won't be coming from Maya anymore, and you're going to work out a plan that doesn't involve our daughter's bank account. So you'll pay it? She snapped. Is that what this is about? You want to feel like a hero now? No, he said. I'm not paying it either. She stared at him, stunned. What? You got yourself into this, he said. You told all of us you were fine. You took money behind my back. You turned our daughter into your safety net. That ends now. If you need a cheaper place, you downsize. If you need help, you ask honestly. But this, he tapped the envelope, never happens again. Her face twisted. You can't do this to me, she said. You can't just abandon me. Sarah leaned forward. You didn't think twice about abandoning Maya when she needed emotional support, she said. You made her believe she was broken, then used her fear to keep her paying. You abandoned her a long time ago. She's just finally walking out of the house you left burning. The teenager at the nearby table wasn't even trying to hide her phone now. A few other people were openly watching. My mother noticed, and that's when the mask truly cracked. Stop staring, she suddenly shouted at the room. Mind your own business. A few heads turned away, but not all. The image she'd spent years cultivating was slipping, and she knew it. You are all ungrateful, she hissed, turning back to us. If it weren't for me, you'd have nothing. I gave you life. I sacrificed everything. You sacrificed my peace, I said quietly. I'm taking it back. I picked up my phone again, not to play the recordings, but to open a group chat I'd created earlier that afternoon. It was labeled, For When I'm Ready. It included Sarah, my dad, my grandmother, and 2 cousins who'd seen pieces of this before, but never had the full picture. With a few taps, I attached a folder of documents, screenshots, bank statements, a written timeline of events, and hit send. Their phones buzzed almost simultaneously. My grandmother's eyes widened as she looked down at hers. What is... Oh my God, she murmured. My mother's head snapped up. What did you do? I made sure the truth can't disappear anymore, I said. I'm not posting it online. I'm not blasting you on social media. I'm just making sure that if you try to twist this later, there are people who know exactly what happened. Her mouth opened and closed, rage and fear colliding behind her eyes. You think they'll all turn against me? She demanded. Is that your big victory? Watching your own mother get abandoned? My victory, I said, is finally knowing that whether they believe you or me doesn't control my life anymore. I'm done buying your version of the story. My dad put his phone down and looked at her. If you want any relationship with me or with Maya or with your own family, he said, you're going to have to take responsibility. Get help. Stop using people. No more secrets. No more debts behind our backs. If you can't do that, you'll be alone. For a moment, I thought she might actually apologize. Her eyes glistened, her mouth trembled. Then something hardened again. Fine, she spat. Go, all of you. Walk away. Don't come crying to me when your lives fall apart. You'll see how useless you really are without me. I stood. That's the thing, Mom, I said. My life started getting better the second I stopped trying to prove I wasn't useless to you. I picked up my bag. Now I'll see what it looks like when I give all that energy back to myself. As I walked toward the door, I felt every pair of eyes on my back, hers included. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small under that weight. I felt free. But as the cool air hit my face outside, a thought tugged at me. I'd taken my power back in that room. I'd cut off her access to my wallet, to my guilt, to my silence. Yet part of me still wondered, if you had the chance to completely destroy someone's reputation after they'd spent years destroying your self-esteem, would you do it? Or is walking away with your peace already the strongest revenge? 3 months later, my alarm went off at 7 a.m., and for the first time in years, my first thought wasn't, did Mom text me about money? It was, do I want oat milk or regular in my coffee? It sounds small, but if you've ever woken up every day bracing for someone else's crisis, you know how huge that is. My phone screen was blissfully quiet. No missed calls, no walls of guilt-tripping messages. Just a text from Sarah. Therapy at 6? I'm bringing snacks. And one from my dad. Proud of you. Call me when you're free. I moved into a slightly better apartment a few weeks ago. Nothing fancy, just a place where the rent came out of my account for me, and only me. My budget still had scars from 3 years of supporting my mother, but without that extra drain, my bank app no longer gave me panic attacks. I'd even started putting a small amount into savings, watching the number grow like a fragile little plant. Work was lighter. The job itself hadn't changed, but I had. I stopped volunteering for every extra shift just to keep up with her demands. I stopped apologizing every time I took a day off. My boss noticed. You seem more focused lately, she'd said last week. Whatever you've changed, keep it up. Not everything was magically better, though. The fallout from that dinner had spread quietly but steadily. My mother lost her apartment within a month. She didn't tell me directly, of course. I heard it from my grandmother first, then from Sarah. Mom had refused to downsize at first, insisting someone would step up and help. When no one did, the landlord finally gave notice. She ended up renting a small room in a shared house across town, far from the neighborhood where everyone knew her as the strong single mom who never needed anyone. Some of her social circle drifted away. The woman who used to host every baby shower and holiday party suddenly stopped getting invited to things. People didn't confront her, they just created distance. My grandmother, Patricia, cut her off financially too. I love her, Grandma told me on the phone, voice heavy. But I'm done funding her lies. I should have stopped this years ago. I'm so sorry, Maya. My dad started separating his finances, quietly but firmly. He stopped covering her small emergencies. He stopped believing every crisis was someone else's fault. He started therapy too. It turned out Mom wasn't the only one who'd been avoiding hard truths. As for my mother, she reacted exactly how you'd expect. At first, she sent me messages that swung wildly between tearful apologies and vicious attacks. I'm so sorry, I didn't realize I hurt you. Would be followed a day later by, you've turned everyone against me. I hope you're happy. You ruined my life. My therapist called it the last thrash of control. She said people who've always gotten their way with guilt and manipulation don't just wake up different. They push harder until they realize it no longer works. So I did something radical. I didn't respond. Not to the attacks, not to the compliments dipped in poison, not to the nostalgic remember when messages. I'd told her my boundary at that table. Until she was ready to accept responsibility without twisting it into my fault, there was nothing to say. Then, one afternoon, she asked to meet. Not in a long, dramatic text. Just a short message. Can we talk? 1 hour. Public place. No money. My stomach dropped when I read it. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part of me, the part that remembered the little glimpses of a different version of her before everything got so twisted, told me I needed closure, one way or another. We met at a cafe across town, not the same restaurant as that night. A neutral place. When I walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked smaller somehow, less polished. Her hair wasn't perfectly done, her makeup lighter. She looked tired. "You look good," she said when I sat down. The compliment landed differently this time. Not like bait, not like a setup for a backhanded comment, just an observation. "Thanks," I said. "You too." It wasn't true, but it was polite. We sat in silence for a moment, the clink of cups and low hum of conversations filling the gap. Finally, she spoke. "I lost my apartment," she said bluntly. "I know," I replied. "Grandma told me." Her mouth tightened, but she nodded. "Of course she did." She took a breath. "I was angry at you for that," she admitted. "I told myself you'd abandoned me, that you enjoyed watching me struggle. But then," she swallowed. "I started looking at the numbers. Really looking. What I made. What you'd been sending. What I'd told everyone. And I realized I was living like I had 3 incomes. Yours, mine, and whatever I could squeeze out of others. I didn't even know how to live on just mine anymore." Hearing her say it out loud felt like stepping into an alternate universe. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because," she said slowly, "I've been talking to someone, a counselor. At first I went because I wanted proof that you were overreacting. I wanted someone to tell me I was just a stressed mother doing her best. But she didn't say that." She laughed bitterly. "She asked me why I was more afraid of being seen as a bad mother than I was of actually being one. I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. She made me write down every time I'd asked you for money," Mom continued. "Every time I'd made you feel guilty. Every time I'd told you you'd be nothing without me. Seeing it on paper." She shook her head. "It looked ugly. Desperate. Like the way my own mother talked to me when I tried to leave home." That part surprised me. She rarely spoke about her childhood, except to say she escaped. "So you copied her," I said quietly. "You told yourself you were different because you had better reasons." Her eyes flashed, but not with anger, more like recognition. "That's what the counselor said too," she admitted. "That I'd built my whole identity on not being my mother, and then I became her anyway." She looked down at her hands. "I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me," she added quickly. "I know I don't deserve that. I'm just trying not to lie anymore. Not to you. Not to myself." Silence stretched between us again, but it didn't feel as suffocating this time. "So what do you want from me?" I finally asked. Because if this is leading to, "Can you help with my new place?" the answer is no. "I know," she said. "I'm not asking for money." She hesitated. "I'm asking for a chance. Not to go back to how things were. I know that's gone. But maybe someday, to have something. A phone call that doesn't end in a fight. A coffee that isn't about bills. I don't expect it today, or tomorrow. I just don't want the last word between us to be that dinner." I thought about that night. About her laugh, sharp and cruel. About the way my voice didn't shake when I finally said, "I stopped paying your rent." About the girl filming, the witnesses, the envelope on the table. I thought about the 3 months since then. How much lighter my life felt, and how much work it had taken to rebuild even a basic sense of self-worth. "Here's what I can offer," I said slowly. "I'm not ready to forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. And even if I do, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened or pretending it wasn't that bad." She nodded, eyes wet. "I understand." If you keep going to counseling, I continued, if you stop asking me for money, if you can talk to me without calling me names, without bringing up everything I've ever done wrong, then maybe we can start with small things. Texts, short calls. See if you can treat me like a human being who doesn't owe you her entire life. Her lips trembled. And if I mess up? Then I step back again, I said, because my boundary isn't punishment. It's protection. I'm not going back to being your emotional wallet, your punching bag, or your backup plan. You don't get to call me useless and then live off my labor. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, as if emotions were still something to be hidden. Fair, she whispered. More than fair. We sat there, two women with matching eyes and completely different lives, trying to figure out if there was any path between us that didn't involve debt or damage. Maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. But for the first time, I felt like the choice was mine. As we stood to leave, she looked at me and said, almost shyly, "You know, you were never useless, Maya. I think I needed you to believe that so I wouldn't have to face how useless I felt without your help." It wasn't the apology I'd once fantasized about, but it was real, messy, imperfect, human. "I know," I said, "and that's exactly why I can't be that girl for you anymore." Later that night, lying in my own bed in my own apartment I paid for with my own money, I scrolled back through our old messages, the ones full of guilt and panic and, "Please, I really need you." Then I looked at the new ones. Short, careful, neutral. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like my mother's emotional hostage. I felt like my own person. People always say, revenge is about making the other person suffer the way you did. But standing there in that cafe, hearing her admit what she'd done, not because she was cornered, not because I played a recording, but because she finally had to face herself, I realized my revenge had already happened. She lost her apartment. She lost the illusion of control. She lost the version of me who would do anything to keep her happy. I didn't need to ruin her life. I just needed to stop letting her ruin mine. So now I'll ask you, if your mom laughed in your face, called you useless, and lived off your sacrifices for years, would you burn her world down the moment you got the chance? Or would you walk away, build something better for yourself, and let the truth be the thing that finally catches up to her?